Today on The State of Us, the problem or problems with ending homelessness. If we've reduced it by 63%, now what? Welcome to The State of Us. I'm your host, Justin T. Weller, joined, of course, today by the one and only Mr. Lance Jackson, your senior historian here at True Chat and the friendly redneck liberal. This is the second part of a two-part series on homelessness. The first one was entitled How to Reduce Homelessness by 63%. And we dedicated basically an entire episode, very much encourage people to go back and listen to that if you haven't heard it, to the first step. Right? The first step is to reduce homelessness. How do you do that? You get people in homes. Well, it's not that. Well, it is. I mean, to reduce homelessness, you put people in a home. Now, we're big on this show, and I think our listeners know that, on let's talk about the larger underlying issues. Why do people become homeless, right? How do we prevent that from happening? And what's the problem with ending homelessness? In other words, well, you're not homeless now. We found you a home, but now what? Because we probably want to get you a job, right? You may need healthcare, and you may need mental health or addiction assistance. This article, and I think this is a great way to start, Lance, is housing a healthcare issue? Is housing a healthcare issue? And that sounds kind of like, well, no, right? I mean, yes, having a good home and stuff, like, you're going to be healthier, but is housing in and of itself something that healthcare should be concerned with? Well, for the past 11 years, Arizona has been spending $30 million a year of state money to pay for supportive housing for more than 2,500 Medicaid recipients who experienced homelessness and have serious mental illness. Studies have consistently shown that Arizona's program reduces healthcare costs. The most recent findings suggest that Arizona's Medicaid agency saved more than $5,000 a month for each housed person, possibly offsetting the cost of housing, which runs about $1,000 a month on average. So in other words, if we get people homes, they're less likely to experience these healthcare problems, which in turn is saving a gross $5,000 a month, a net in the neighborhood of $4,000 a month. Because remember, folks, these are averages. So sometimes the savings is greater, sometimes it's less. But if they're spending on average $1,000 a month to get these people housed, right? Versus if we don't house them, we need to spend about $5,000 a month in healthcare costs. Isn't it better to spend $1,000 instead of $5,000?
Well, and if you listen to the first episode, you'll remember that the history of modern homelessness was started in the 1970s by shutting all of these facilities that were paid for by the taxpayers and releasing these people with these issues that we're now helping. So we've come full circle, the pendulum, whatever, we tried to save money and say, oh, we're just going to shut down these things and these people, we have better narcotics to deal with, mental instability and mental problems that people have. And this is a new age and there are abuses taking place in these facilities. So we're going to be better off if we release them. Well, 50 years later, we found out, well, that didn't work quite as well. And so now what are we doing? We're using taxpayer dollars to actually save money. So we've come full circle with this. And of course you want to save money. And what we're doing is we're addressing the homeless problem. So we kind of, as you pointed out in the first show, with good intentions, created a lot of this problem. And now we're trying to go back and use federal, in this case, it's only state tax dollars because Arizona's program is using the state Medicaid money they get from the federal government. They'd like, since this is so successful, right? Something is successful here. We're actually using tax dollars that are saving people money and saving the taxpayers money and also helping people who need help. oh my goodness, my head's about to explode because that's the way this system is supposed to work. But now then I have to be a little bit of a pessimist because Arizona is saying this is working so well. We have more people we need to help. We want to use some federal Medicaid dollars so we can now help more people. And the federal government historically for the last 25 years has said, no, you can't do that. You can't use federal Medicaid money to pay rent. We are using tax dollars in a good way. We're using tax dollars that are A, helping people, and B, saving the taxpayers money. Can we use federal Medicaid money to do this? And the federal government, both Democrats and Republicans, here's where I get to rail against the machine, have said, nope, can't do that. What? So the federal government says, I'm going to take your tax dollars, Lance Jackson, but we're going to waste it. We have a program that works that could save and help people. All right, it's going to save money in the long run. We can stretch the dollar. We can stretch your tax dollars further, and we're going to help more people with your tax dollar, Mr. Jackson. But guess what? We're not going to do that because that doesn't make sense. We're going to continue to waste your tax dollars.
For decades, research has shown that supportive housing, which combines services like counseling and job training with keys to a home, is the most effective way to provide for people experiencing chronic homelessness, who make up about a quarter of the nation's homeless population. Sadly, though, the number of people enduring chronic homelessness has been rising, up 42% between 2016 and 2020. So you might be sitting there saying, with evidence that programs like this work and states having invented and finding success with their programs, why would the federal government not be supportive? Well, this is where, if you listen to the first episode, I'm going to tie this back in for you. They might not be supportive because they would say, well, HUD, Housing and Urban Development, has federal voucher programs. We already set money aside for housing, right? Well, we already set money aside for housing, Lance.
But like you said, this works because we do what? We get rid of the interagency fighting. That's what the cities have done.
Simplify.
Right?
Streamline.
So now we have one government agency fighting another government agency for control of a situation, and nothing good gets done. Why can't the federal government get out of its own way?
The federal government's going to say, we already provide this. Never mind that, as we identified at the end of the last episode, as you might recall, that, oh, by the way, to get this voucher, this is the way it used to be in Houston, right? In order for you to get this voucher, which is a random lottery system that maybe happens every 4 or 5 years if you're lucky. So if you're homeless in between, then, just too bad. We're not going to help you.
Please don't say it, because my brain's going to explode.
But if compounding the issue of, we're not going to let you spend our money that'll save money for us and you, we're not going to let you do that because we already have this other program that's awesome that works. The program requires that the person filling it out, who, mind you, is homeless because they need a housing voucher, list their mailing address so that they can receive notification of whether or not they're selected. So imagine, Lance, these people fill it out. You have no idea if you're going to get it, right? And by some miracle, you're selected, but you weren't able to list an address because, oh, gee, you're homeless, which is why you're filling this out, and you don't have an address. So how are you supposed to get notified that you got the voucher, which you have not good odds at getting anyway, because the only way we notify you is by sending it snail mail. So again, this is where are the people in the government actively trying to be evil? No, this is a mistake. It's an oversight because, as we talked about in the first episode, an address is a hugely easy thing for most of us to take advantage, because the government says, well, we got to notify people, right? Well, how are we going to do that? Well, we need to know where they live, and we'll send them notification. So just like with most forms, write down your address. Well, okay, I live the underpass at the intersection of 75 and Main Street. And
that's where I live today.
Right. And I'm there right now. But if you don't get there, if it's 6 months from now, then it's winter. So then I'm going to have to go over here. And
this isn't right. I know my head's exploding. Okay. This is so asinine. I ask you not to say it because but I'm not railing against Democrats and I'm not railing against Republicans. This is the government. Okay. This is an easy fix, right? Well, so let's fix it.
Federal money,
Come on, guys,
empower the local people who are doing the work,
right,
to say, you know what? We're working with these people. I have access to this many vouchers right now. I don't need to write out this long form application and send it to the federal government and wait for processing and then have to try to find this person again. They're here right now with me. They meet the qualifications. I have the money. Let me get it to them.
Streamline the process, right? I mean,
that's right. And that's what Houston did. Part of why Atlanta and some others are now thinking about copying them is because they said, okay, we have to figure out a way to remove the 72 steps required for a homeless veteran to wait 790 days to get a home.
But now all we're asking is, hey, federal government, streamline the process as well, please.
Right. And
everybody else is doing it. Please, federal government, will you do it so that my tax dollars can be used for good instead of being used for redundancy?
Because the other thing is, it's not 100% fixed. For example, that example of the homeless, veteran in Houston, you went from 790 days, more than 790 days down to 32. 32 is still too long. But 32 is a heck of a lot better than 792 days and over 70 bureaucratic steps that have to be followed in order for you to get this done. They've cut all of that by more than a third, and they've streamlined the process. So is it perfect? No, there's still a lot of bureaucracy. Is there a lot less bureaucracy? Yes. And I think that's a huge part of talking about why should the federal government considering releasing Medicaid dollars for this? It will save Medicaid money. You can save government, federal agency money because you can put the power to distribute it in the hands of the states and the local governments who are on the front lines facing this stuff. So you don't have to pay as much for the federal government to duplicate administrative tasks that are already being done by the people who are working with these humans, right? So it saves money all around and it solves a problem. Houston's reduced its homelessness, but now what happens? What's next? How do you do supportive housing, which is combining services like counseling and job training with keys to a home? We got you the home. We took that first step. We've revised Medicaid and we've made it possible to use these dollars to save Americans money and address an important healthcare issue. Gee, boy, that sounds nice, doesn't it? Now what? Keep it here on The State of Us, and we'll be right back. Gonna need a job. Because one of the examples in the first episode that Lance and I read about, one of the individuals who benefited from this program, she's worried now, about, am I going to be able to keep this apartment? I need $800+ a month to pay this rent. And I have my child at home now. They're back home with me. Got a job interview lined up though. One of the biggest challenges, I think, Lance, with this that we have to talk about is, okay, you've got them the house. You want to get them the job. Well, what are the barriers to getting a job? Well, there's a lot of them when you really start to think about it. We've removed one of the biggest ones, which is you don't have to worry about where you're going to sleep tonight, right? You have access to running water, a shower, a roof over your head. You have some degree of security. Another big thing is, how are you going to get to work? Do you have a bank account, right? And do you have clothes for your job? Do you know how to put together a resume? When did you last have a job? What are the places that might be hiring that would accept you with your potential lack of job history or your long lapse in job history? Those are all really important questions, and it can be pretty difficult to figure out how or where you start on that, especially if, because again, this is such a big thing. You cannot ask people to know what they don't know, right? You cannot ask people to know what they do not know. If you out there listening to this show, like Lance and I, know, okay, well, if I needed these things, here are some of the steps I would begin the process to get those things done. That's great. But what if you've not ever done those and nobody's ever shared those steps with you? How are they to know this? So this leads us to, Lance, what I think is a huge thing, which is the caseworkers, right? You have to have enough caseworkers who can truly be focused on somebody for enough time. And we're not talking about forever. We're talking about probably a year or two to make sure they're up on their feet. navigate this process. Say, I'm the person with the connection. I know the steps you need to go through. Let's go through the steps, right? Let's find you those clothes. Let's get you those hygiene products. Let's get that resume together. Let's go to these list of employers who we know are likely, they're looking to hire people right now, and they'll be willing to hire somebody, with your job history. And let's take you through all those steps, the many, many weeks and months of steps that have to be done to get you the job, make sure you keep the job, and that you have some place to put that money, that you begin budgeting, that you begin saving, and that you're able to make your rent payments. That all sounds simple, but there's a big human element in that. And I think when we talk about now what, we'll get them a job. Well, that's easy. Well, no, it's not. It's not easy when you have all these things you're facing that most of us are not facing if we're going to look for a job.
Well, and we know that, right? Because we've done that. I mean, I'm working with 2 young people right now who are, trying to get their high school diploma and become independent, being able to live on their own and make enough money. And, basically getting them a job has become, and there are government agencies that we found out that are going to kind of help that, but we've been intervening. And basically what we've done is we've gone to people that we know that hire people, right? And if you need that personal introduction or in order to get that job. Now, it's easier now, right? I mean, because we know that we've talked about it multiple times on this show, that there are more people who need workers than there are workers looking for jobs. So, it is easier now to find a job, but still you're taking people, as you pointed out, who they don't know the process, right? They don't know how to go about it. So you need to lead them, you need to lead them through the process so that they can end up with a job. And it is very frustrating at times and very difficult to manipulate the system and everything else. And we know how to do it, right? I can't imagine if these young people were doing it on their own. Okay. That's who I work with. And as adults, right? If you've been out of the workforce or have for multiple years or never been in the workforce, you don't know how the process works. And so you're trying to play a game without knowing the rules. Justin and I are big board game players, okay? So first thing we do when we sit down to play a board game is we grab the rules, because if you know the rules, it's easier to win the game. And so if you're talking about, and again, I'm not trying to be,
Feels like a lot of both of these shows, Lance, are us being like, duh,
right.
Right? I mean.
But what we do is we say, well, you have to get a job. Okay, well, how do I go about that? Oh, what do you mean you don't know how to get a job? Well, okay, but to those
Did anybody
of us,
hand them the rule book?
Right. To those of us who have applied for jobs on multiple occasions, we know the system, right? But to a newbie, to somebody who's never played the game before, they don't know how. You've got to teach people the rules to that process so that they can get a job and then learn how to get a better job and then get a better job so that eventually they become self-sustaining. You can't just walk out there and get a job and become very rarely anymore can you just walk out there, get your first job, and that's going to sustain you for the rest of your life.
And I think
you got to teach the process.
Teach the process and show the opportunity, because one of the things that you have to keep in mind is for somebody like the person that's talked about in this first article, there was a time where they were not homeless, right? But their life wasn't necessarily good when they weren't homeless. So homelessness was bad, sure, but life wasn't necessarily good before either. So now they have a place that's their own.
And things weren't being patterned for them by the adults they were living with,
right,
that would make them successable.
Or the things that were being patterned were actually counterproductive to what would make them successful.
Which many of us don't understand.
Right.
Because we grew up in homes, some people would say, and I tend to agree more and more, we were lucky because we grew up in a home where this was patterned for us by our families and our grandparents and aunts and uncles,
support networks,
our extended network and everything else. We had that. I'm finding out more and more the older I get, fewer and fewer people have that. Fewer and fewer people have that extended family and that network where they can count on people to help them out and to get advice. And I'm not saying help them out by handing them money. I'm saying give them advice. These people that we're talking about who are homeless don't have anybody to go to ask, well, what do I do next? Or what's the best way to solve this problem?
And a lot of times they don't even know that there is a next. And I think that's a huge thing that we've talked about. For so many of the students that we help at the youth center, this is where they are right now is so much better than it's ever been. They're not in their mind thinking, well, gee, there's got to be something better. It's like, this is it, baby. They tell us this is it.
Right. They tell us that every day.
Right.
The kids that come in, most of them look at us and say, this is the best part of my day. This is the best part of my week. This is the best place I've ever been. Yep. And it's like, and while that's makes us feel good, it's also, to your point, very sad.
Yes.
That what we're providing them is the best thing they've ever had. And they're satisfied with that because they don't even know that there's something better than that out there.
Right. And and I think the very important thing there is for most people, it's not a lazy, you don't know what you don't know, right? This is better than anything I've ever experienced. So this is it, right? I've made it.
This is nirvana, right? This is,
and it's, well, no. There's that. We're really glad that this is improving, your state of being, but we want to show you that it can be, believe it or not, even better. And I think that's when we talk about those next steps, which is what you were mentioning, Lance. It's so important that we make sure people understand. You have to keep showing them the next step because at some point, things are infinitely better than they were for them from their perspective. So why would they assume that they need more, right? It's like if you're out there and you have a good job and you have your family and you're pretty happy with life and things are going well, you're not feeling this big need to keep, I'm not content. I'm going to find something else by God. And I just hate, I can't be thankful for what I have. And in many ways they're appreciating what they have. It's like, man, this is wonderful. Another huge part here, Lance, that I think we've got to discuss, right, is this has been mentioned throughout, and you've heard this. A lot of these people that end up being homeless have some type of mental health issue that, generally speaking, is totally unaddressed and untreated. We've done some episodes in the past few months on the mental health crisis in our country, the staggering lack of access to mental health professionals, the slack that the primary care providers are trying to pick up, but again, are not, expertly trained in that area. And by the way, that's for the people that have insurance, have jobs, have houses, and have access to healthcare. We're talking about a population who, decent chance that one of the reasons they're homeless is because they have one of these problems and there wasn't a way to get a service. So what do we do about that part? You're the caseworker and it's like, well, gee, this person wants to get a job. We got them a house. They want to get a job, but they're struggling. Maybe they're struggling with schizophrenia, Well, it could be real difficult to get a job if we don't do something about that. But you could get a job if we figure out a way to work on that. So we're going to talk about the mental health component of this as we discuss the problem or problems with ending homelessness. Keep it here on The State of Us. We'll be right back. The psychiatric hospitals of the 1970s. I don't know about you, Lance, but that is not a place that I would have wanted to go. From what I've read and studied, doesn't sound like a very, a lot of them, again, potentially good intentions, potentially really bad results. So,
which is why we shut them as a society. We shut them down.
This is bad. We don't want to do things this way.
But to your point in the earlier episode, we didn't have a place for these people to go.
Now
we said, where you are is horrible. The abuses are awful. Nobody should have to live that way. We're going to release you from that. Yay. Oh, but we didn't think about now what are you going to do? Because you were there because you needed help. Okay. You were abused mentally, physically, emotionally, whatever. And that was horrible. And we need to stop that. But we didn't solve the bottom line problem of you need some kind of help. And we didn't address it. So now you're walking the streets and you can't function in society because of your mental instability And so now you're homeless. So now we're finally 50 years later getting back to solving that problem. Okay. That for you to function in our society, we have to get you the mental help that you need so that you can then clear the hurdles towards being independent and having a job and providing for yourself. So, because it's not just enough to get you a place to live. That's the first step. That's what we've been talking about now for almost 2 entire episodes. So we got you that place to live, but you have mental struggles. You are mentally ill. Just like if somebody was sick, right? If they were physically ill, you would get them medicine, you would get them help, you would get them better food so that they would be physically fit to get a job. Well, now we have to deal with the mental side of people, that when they are mentally ill, they need medicine, they need structure, they need help, whatever that may be, so that then they can go get a job and be that contributing member to society. So we got them housed, maybe we even got them clothed, and we got them fed. Now we have to help them with their illness.
From the original article in the first episode, we're going to build on this example. When you're drowning, it doesn't help if your rescuer insists that you learn to swim before returning you to shore. You can address your issues once you're on land or not. Either way, you join the wider population of people battling demons behind closed doors and in a home. The point there is, and that's what we talked about, the first step is to get somebody a home, right? But now to go back to this example of somebody is drowning. The person drowning has a broken arm, right? Are you going to insist that they fix their broken arm before they stop drowning? Or are you going to get them out of the pool and then take them to go get their broken arm addressed, right? Again, that's so simple for most of us. Well, I mean, you can't fix their broken arm if they're drowning. We got to get them out of the water, right? And then take them to the emergency room.
Why are you even asking me that, Justin? That's so obvious.
But we don't do that. Right. With homelessness and mental health because, well, it's not the same. Well, yeah, I mean, it is. These people are fighting for their lives. Many of them die, which is not undifferent if you're drowning. And what we do is say, well, gee, you have an addiction. And after you are no longer an addict, or are in recovery, then we will help you find a place to live. Again, really hard.
Or you're a manic depressive or you're schizophrenic.
Right.
Once you get that problem fixed, then we'll get you a place to live and get you a job.
Yeah. No. They go hand in hand. You cannot, if there is no stability in your life, if what you're focused on is surviving, all those other things we've talked about, a job, if you have a health problem, mental health or physical health, right? Those are secondary because you're focused on, can I eat today? Will there be a place to sleep? I mean, that's it. Can I stay alive today? Getting medication for the pain in my knee that makes it hard to walk is down on the list of things that's important to do, or the voices in my head that make it really difficult to focus. Again, down on the list because I'm hungry and I need to find food today. And by the time I've walked, to wherever the food is and gotten that and come back and the day's over. And so that's, again, when we talk about why is housing first, you have to offer some degree of stability, meet people where they are, address the most basic issue. And then you can't leave it at that though. And I think that's where people get disenfranchised is like, well, we're just giving them a house and it's a handout and there's no plan. That's why you have to fund the other component of it, which is the good caseworkers who are not, because that's the other problem is right now, most caseworkers are drastically overworked, right? Way too many clients to far too few caseworkers. We've talked about that with school counselors as well. These are good people who are professionals and a lot of them can work miracles, but not if they have, 200 plus people that they're trying to manage.
Exactly.
That means, again, just a little math for folks, right? If you have 200 people that you're managing, how are you going to see all of them even once a month? Because if you're working 5 days a week
and you have an 8-hour workday,
full-time job, right? I don't know what math you're going to do that suggests that you're going to get to spend more than a couple of minutes with each person one time a month. One time a month. And we want them to get a job. We got to get them clothes, get their resume together. We got to get them food. We got to get them. I mean, how are you going to do that in 5 minutes once a month?
And as a school counselor, you have to run testing. You have to call parents. You have to check on grades. You have all these
prepare for college entry.
Right. You have all these other responsibilities. You're just not sitting in your office checking in with students.
Right. And the caseworker can't 5 days a week, every single day, be out talking to their clients, because then when are they going to find time to help coordinate the services? They have to have some time where they can be on the phone, calling people, setting things up, trying to help arrange stuff. I mean, so again, that's a huge part of just understanding the basic math that these people can be working their tails off and still not be able to do a very quick or efficient job for people just because they have too many people that they're trying to deal with.
But to your point, and these are the numbers that you know like the back of your hand, but when we can take someone and house them and get them a job and get them educated, what happens to their contribution to society versus those people that don't? I'm asking you that question to explain to our audience, because it's like, well, this seems like an awful lot of work to get one person a place to live and get them a job and get them educated. Why are we going to spend all this time and effort doing this? What's that mean for those of us in society who don't need this help?
The simple economic equation for people to understand is, if we just take one person, right, who did not get their high school diploma and get them their diploma, if we just do that one thing, right? And this is one of a big process, because we're talking about getting people a job, and it can be very difficult to get a job if you don't have a diploma, right? So this is possibly...
And we're talking about getting them their mental services that they need, or their health services that they need to be able to have a job,
right,
or to work a job.
Just doing just this one item of all that, not everything else, but just the one item, they will earn $9,000 more per year above what they would have made otherwise, which equates to, by the way, about $500,000 of additional local economic earning potential over their lifetime. And that's one component. That's just the education component. That's not talking about, okay, well, this is somebody who started out totally homeless. This is just somebody who starts out without the degree. You add in the homeless factor, now you're tripling or quadrupling not only the additional, that's the key word, earning potential, but you also don't have the cost associated with having to house them and feed them and provide them free health care, and on and on and on and on, right?
So not only, so it's a plus minus system.
Right.
Not only do they earn more, which is the plus, but they don't cost the taxpayer as much because they don't need as many services, because they now can pay for things themselves. So there's savings on both ends.
It's like what we talked about in the first episode of just getting people into a home, right? So we haven't gotten them their GED, which is what we just talked about. We haven't even done that. But just getting them into a home, on the low end, $5,000 a year per person in savings per year. And that's just take them off the street, put them in a home. And how does that happen? Well, less ambulance calls. We reduce Medicare costs by 30% because of emergency room visits that aren't necessary. Right?
Less police calls.
To
check on something that's going on.
And here there's ripple effects, right? If the police are spending time dealing with the homeless population, they're not spending time on many other very important things. And I mean, that's one of those.
So you take something else.
Oh, yeah.
You take something off their plate.
If the police weren't spending all this time dealing with this,
they can then deal with other things and maybe solve those issues, and then can start to do more positive things within the community because they're just not running around putting out forest fires. You know, we can actually solve some of their problems so they can get to the job that they want to do, and that is to be a good public presence in the neighborhood.
One of the administrators at our local hospital, Lance, explained to me the huge challenge that their emergency department has, because so much of what comes in is not an emergency. But because of the way an emergency department is set up, they have no choice but to do something about it. So when you talk about healthcare costs, why are the costs of healthcare ballooning? And this is everyday life, you and me. Now, we're not talking about the homeless people, but what Lance is paying for healthcare. One of the reasons it's expensive is because you got a bunch of people showing up to the emergency department who don't need to be at the emergency department. And what does that mean? Well, we need more staff because we got more volume of patients. And the emergency department's the most expensive because it's unscheduled, immediate providing of care. So it's also the place where we're spending huge dollars to take care of things that aren't emergencies, but people don't have another option. So this is what they do.
Well, we're just about out of time on homelessness, but that sounds like another show to me. But we need to be setting up places where people can go what would not have the dire need since they don't have a dire need.
The point to people is that when we talk about the problem with ending homelessness, it's not just the problem, but what are the benefits of it?
Sure.
And the benefits are things that have a real impact, not just for those people, but through our systems, right? Less emergency room visits is good for all of us. It's good for all of us. It lowers healthcare costs. That's a good thing. That's what we want.
Another step towards balancing the budget if you're worried about only the economic side of things.
Reducing homelessness allows police to spend more time policing things that, are dangerous. And not that being homeless isn't dangerous, but most homeless people are not dangerous to the general population. But the police have to spend time dealing with that. So that's our taxpayer dollars being allocated to pay the police to do a thing. So those are just two of the many, many examples, right, of ways that it trickles down into what we do. Not the least of which are all the many economic data that we cited about just our regular taxpayer dollars going to this. If we release federal funds to be allowed to be spent directly on this programming, you save all this money. Me, you, Lance, everybody listening, right? We all save money in what we pay in taxes because it's being put to better use. Simple.
And our tax dollars that we're saving are actually doing some good.
But it requires checking the egos at the door and everybody getting behind a solution, even if they don't all think it's the single best solution. If it's the plurality that comes, if it is the solution that is the plurality, let's do that thing, right?
Exactly.
It's kind of the ranked choice voting thing.
Yep.
This may not have been any of our first choice, but it was all our third choice. So by God, that's what we're going to give a try, Well, and Houston has proved that will be effective.
Right. Right. That is working better than anything else that anybody else is doing.
Right. Yeah.
And why do we do this, folks? Because here at True Chat, we have a mission. And our mission is to educate people by providing honest, open, and respectful conversations. And hopefully you've liked our series on homelessness. You share it with your family and friends. And they say, well, this sounds like a show that I might like to listen to on my way to work or on my way home from work or while I'm sitting in that traffic jam going to the doctor. Tell them they can find us as a podcast on Spotify, Overcast, Stitcher, Apple Podcast, and everywhere podcasts are found.
The State of Us releases new episodes as a podcast Tuesdays and Thursdays, first thing in the morning. Those same episodes are also heard on the weekends on AM and FM radio stations across the country. For the State of Us, I'm Justin T. Weller.
I'm Lance Jackson.
Special thanks to producer Bradley Butch. Thank you all, our audience, for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Be the change. Be sure to check out our website, thestateofus.org, for books, articles, and all the ways to tune in. thestateofus.org.